So today we will be painting this from Reaper Bones. It's very different to a lot of the other things I've painted recently. It is not a hideous monster, but an innocent looking woman picking vegetables or something. And I'm trying to consider the colours across the miniature here. I didn't want there to be too much brown, and I wanted the browns to be distinct from each other. Obviously the satchel will all be one colour. I'm basing that in Rhinox hide, so that will be a dark brown. That's a fairly significant part of the miniature, so here I want to be able to highlight up to have a really big contrast, and that's why I started with the darkest brown there. All of the smaller areas of brown, I'm using much lighter shades of brown. Although I want them to be different from each other, I am restricting myself only to 2 different browns because I'm trying to work a bit on my colour theory and I want things to have balance. So I'm trying to have points at the top and the bottom that match, or at the front and the back that match, and that's much easier to do when you're using the same base coat. I decided I wanted, I guess, a Disney princess kind of colour scheme in terms of the dress. So we have a blue dress with white sleeves. Now white's known to be difficult to paint, so I've used this kind of off-white, this bone colour for the sleeves, and then we can just highlight that up to white and not have to worry about shades or anything particularly complicated or difficult. And it's only a small part of the miniature, and the highlights will be pretty obvious where to place, so I'm not too worried about painting the white. And then keeping with earthy tones, we have green, a pretty dark green to go with the browns and things for the kind of apron, cloak. I feel like this is the first time I've painted a person in a while, so I want to work on my skin tones and things. I'm going to go for a classic that I seem to keep seeing, so we're going to do a base coat of Bugman's Glow and then kind of work our way up from there. And so with all the base coats and colours and all of that down, this is the situation we're in. I must be honest, I really like the miniature and I thought it was going to be cool, and I got to this point where I had the base coat down and I wasn't particularly happy with it. But I persevered and thought maybe once I start doing the highlighting I will feel differently, and that's exactly what happened. I started with the dress because that's a fairly big part of it, and I also remembered, annoyingly, after putting this base coat down, that this paint dries really glossy, so I wanted to cover as much of that as possible to take away some of the shine. Maybe that was a reason I didn't like it. And so I'm just using layering here and going over with a thinned kind of transparent-ish paint, bit by bit, just making it brighter and brighter. Again, it's nice and easy to tell where the highlights would be because there are significant folds in the material of the dress, so we just kind of follow that and put our highlights down bit by bit. One of the more difficult parts with this miniature is it's pretty condensed. She's kneeling down, so everything's kind of folded into one point, so I'm having to be particularly careful about not brushing onto other parts of the miniature. I must admit I did this a few times and had to go back and forth, especially when doing the base coat, so that's just something to bear in mind, something I had to learn again. The thing I painted before this was that dragon, which was basically just 2 colours, and it was pretty big, so it was much less of an issue. Because this dress is a fairly significant part of the miniature, I wanted to get a fairly high level of contrast, so I covered most of the base with brighter blues and very gradually got to smaller and smaller areas. Once I had the dress highlighted, I started to appreciate the miniature much more and was much happier to carry on, so that was good. Started highlighting the apron because that was on top of the dress and it just seemed to be a natural progression. There's a pocket at the bottom and I was considering painting that another colour, but I think if you had a green cloak that had a pocket on it, it would probably stay green, so I just left it as it was. I think I painted the collar differently to what the designer of the miniature perhaps intended. I think that's supposed to be a collar of the dress, but I quite like this high peaked collar apron cloak thing, so I stuck with it, and it helped with that balance thing I talked about before with colour theory. So now some of the green collar goes around the back of her neck, and that kind of balances in with the leaves on the side, and it just seemed to tie in a bit better to my beginner eyes. So now we get to bring some much warmer and I guess more appealing browns over the bag, covering up most of that darkness, and like I say, I want to go fairly high with the contrast here. This and the dress are probably the two most significant parts of the miniature. I highlight normally with layers at the beginning, and then at the end I start kind of doing this kind of striped, maybe stippling kind of effect, just to make it look a bit more, I don't think it's a leather, but to give it maybe a woven effect, just more texture to it rather than looking so silky smooth. For the straps, obviously the same browns, but I may have skipped a couple of layers, going to the brighter colours a bit quicker, and again just kind of doing this stippling or striping across it to give the straps especially this leather or textured look. Because the straps are a small area, going to brighter colours quicker I don't think is too much of a problem, because you won't necessarily see the gradient in it. You need a bigger jump to see that there is a difference there. As for the sleeves, like I said before, we based it in a bone white, and now I'm just coming in bit by bit with base colour mixed with white and then with white on top. So it does go to complete white, and we just have that kind of bone colour in the shadows. Her shoulders are obviously going to be quite bright, they're at the top of her body, they're going to be fairly well highlighted, so going straight to white and not having too much shadow wasn't too much of an issue for me, and I actually quite like the end result. As for painting the flesh, like I say, it's something I haven't done in a while. I've gone for the fairly classic recipe, and I'm paying a bit more attention to the face and things like that. Not that I don't normally, but I guess I've seen a lot of Reddit posts recently of the amazing detail and quality that people get on faces, and I've always put that down to them painting bigger scale or busts and things like that, but that's not the case. Even on something as small as this, they can get such an amazing finish, and I guess I want to work towards getting better and work towards being able to do that. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I think I completely failed, to be honest with you, but I certainly put in more effort than I maybe normally would. I was really pleased with how the highlights came out on the arms and the hands. I guess I got the placement of those a bit better. And across the fingers, again I concentrated more, going straight to the individual fingers. So it is the darkest tone in between the fingers, which is something I don't necessarily normally do. I often tend to consider shapes like large volumes and then go into smaller volumes, but I considered the individual fingers and things right from the beginning this time. For the face, to get better at that, maybe I need to go back to, I guess, drawing, or just more basic understanding of where highlights and things should fall on the face. I did do very thin coats, so just a glaze or a filter or whatever you want to call it, of red just to bring some warmth to it. I have that across her cheeks. I tried a bit on the nose. I think the place that this actually worked was on her arm. I brought it down on this kind of front arm that's holding a leaf into the elbow, and it worked really well there. Then it's just time to finish off all the extra little bits, mostly the base. I'm just going to do a quick brown base coat and then slap down a wash, paint the in black, use metallic paint on the tools that she has in her hand, and there we are. This is the end result that we have. So this miniature was a bit interesting. I really liked the miniature to begin with. I put the base coat down and then didn't like it at all, and then started to do the highlights and started to appreciate it more and more, and now I look at it and I think it's perhaps one of the cleanest finished miniatures that I've done in a long time. All of the lines kind of work nicely. I had considered doing black lining just to amp up this contrast, and it's what people tend to do at higher levels, but I must admit I wimped out. I got scared of ruining the miniature and I liked how it was. I put a lot of effort into not going into the wrong areas, so it's fairly neat and clean without any black lining. I don't think there necessarily needs to be any separation between the sections because of the colours that I chose, so see all of those as excuses if you want to, but I am not going to do the black lining. I'm going to call this finished, and I like the result. If you do too, then let me know in the comments, or tell me things that you want me to try or learn or anything basically, as it will help me out tremendously. And that's what I got for you this time, so until next time, bye!